Hi, welcome to this Open Security Summit session in December 2022. We're going to cover, a lot of interesting ideas. I hope they're interesting, right, around the idea of crowdsourcing security talent. Ant was supposed to be here with me, but unfortunately he got pulled into an exec call. So I'll do the first pass, and we'll do another one a bit further down the line. And this is some of the topics. I kind of was brainstorming with him. And we come up with this interesting ideas, right? So I kind of wanted to sort of pass here and basically go through it. So crowdsourcing security talent. So the idea here, what we're talking about is that there is a massive shortage of talent in the market today, right? We have a big challenge of finding talent, and I think one of the problems we have is the talent available, the talent that exists is not being fully used and is not available, with the right, in the right model. So the logic that we're bouncing off is this idea of, and by the way, this is like free IP, right? This is basically, this is a company that if I had time, I would set it up, but I don't, right? So anybody, please set this up, because I actually would like to be on the receiving end. So I would like to be the talent that this company would provide. So the pitch here is that there is space in the market for a company to really connect the dots between the talent and, for example, like the talent that literally is on this call, right, with the people that want to buy and have access to that talent. The key part here is that the talent that we're talking about is already employed in companies. So this is not the typical recruitment model where you go and work over here and you go and work over there, right? This is taking people and individuals who work, quasi full-time or quasi-full-time for companies that have a bit more extra time, that want to do extra things, that want to evolve with other things, and to connect the dots between those individuals and the companies who need it. So I'll give you several case studies and examples to kind of make this a bit more real. So today, if you wanted to say, hey, I just became a CISO, for example, or I just got a new job, I just got that thing, and what I really would like to do is to get 5 experienced CISOs in this area, and I'd like to pick their brain, right? And I'd like to basically have them spend 5 hours, 10 hours, 20 hours, right, over the next couple of months on this, so I can have a really great, almost like industry vetted and aligned strategy for what I want to do, right? Today, that's impossible, right? It's literally, what you do is the individuals that have better networks kind of do a little bit of it, right? Where they might go to that networks, you might get a couple of dinners, you might, talk to a couple of people, but that's really not scalable, right? And that doesn't really allow you sometimes to have access to extra talent that you would have. So the logic here is that, you want a kind of talent agency, the same way that you have for sports people or for other individuals, that in a way brokers that relationship. Somebody that already figure out the contracts, figure out the ways, the comms, even creating an environment to collaborate is not trivial. But if you can connect the dots, then you can actually have a situation where the individuals who have extra hours or want to do extra research or want to involve in extra things can find the companies who need that talent, who need that. And if you sort of, in the worldly maps model, right, if you can kind of go from the current very custom build Genesis world that exists in that to a much more productized and workflow, I think we can actually create a much better workflow on this. So Peter, you added Upwork, right? And I want to caveat this, that I'm a big fan of Upwork. I used Upwork quite spectacularly. I actually build quite, very successful teams on Upwork. In fact, I've used Upwork a little bit as a platform to build some of these. The problem is that Upwork doesn't really curate this, doesn't really curate a lot of the talent. And it's, to be honest, Upwork could build this, right? Like, just to be clear, like Upwork, TopTal, next generation talent companies, for me, it's a market that exists that they just don't leverage, right? But this is a bit more specialized, and I think you can start with security, but you can apply this to all sorts of other industries. But the logic here is that, take you as an example, right? How
Sure.
does somebody has access to you, right? Now you're going to have a number of requirements that you says, I only want to work for this kind of projects. I only have X amount of hours. I can only work for those companies, because you might say, well, I work for this industry. Clearly my company is not going to be happy for me to consult for the competitor, but your company might want to make you happy and says, you know what, it's okay for you to spend 4 hours here. It's okay for you to do, because you already spend extra time, learning, right? And actually learning on a project for another company that is actually quite interesting is actually a great way to learn, right? So Upwork could do this, but I don't think today they stay geared for it, right? They kind of, their model is a lot more, hey, here's a bunch of people, get them in, do some stuff, right? But I feel that there is a niche here. There's an ecosystem that you can create that really connects the security professionals with the people that want to buy 1 hour, 5 hours, 10 hours, 20 hours of those individuals' time.
I would still argue lightly that Upwork can do this, really, because we've had here at Jumia, we've had massive success with Upwork and finding talent. I find that as a leader who hires people from Upwork, the more you're in that system, and I don't want to make this whole thing about that, but the more time I spend in it and the more I curate my JD and have specifics and deliverables and milestones, the clearer it is to the talent out there. But I just thought I'd offer it up. That,
no. Look, it's a massive thing, and I think that when we was thinking about this, so it's almost an inch. So, but the problem with this is not just Upwork, right? So it's like Upwork is just one piece of the puzzle, right? So I remember when I was doing some thinking about this. Well, it's kind of a mix of actually a pure talent agency, which is kind of what I started. It's like, if you think about it, the talent is rare, right? The talent that you want is actually highly curated, right? These are highly, in a way, professionals that you have to be careful, right? Again, their time. So the first part of this is almost like the artists, the having access to insane talents that can deliver, right? The best footballers, the best musicians, the best comedians, the best actors, etc. Right. So it's a mix of, first of all, it's a smaller audience of individuals who have done it, right? Then is a mix of recruitment companies, which is that work of how do you connect the dots, how do you go out, how do you broker the deal between one and the other. And the point here is to dramatically reduce the overheads of the players, right? And that's also very important. Then you got the top talent Upwork, right? Yes, and also what I like about them is the platform, right? The platform where everything's online, everything's there, right? But then it's almost like, again, there's the online dating element here, right? There's kind of, does he like, do you want it, don't you want it, right? Which again, Upwork does a little bit, right? And by the way, I haven't used a lot of online dating, but I believe that's kind of how, but there's also a kind of a rating element, right? And then there's also the bug bounty crowdsourcing. Because one of the things I like about this model is that where it gets interesting is when you can create super teams, right? So imagine you want a piece of work done. Well, there's these 5 CISOs, there's these 5 heads off, there's these, guys who came from incident response, or these guys who are amazing at governance. You want a mix, right? So I think the creation of super teams, 4 or 5 individuals, again, with diverse backgrounds, diversity built in, into that group, almost again becomes an asset in itself. Right. And then you got, the sort of a lot of the element of some of the management consulting elements, where it's about very tight deliverables, right? Very focused deliverables to achieve something. And then a lot of professional services, right? Because I think about, like, there's a lot of management companies who provide this, right? There's some high-end consultants who provide this. What I think they dropped the ball is in having access to the talent. And more importantly, you need to create a framework that makes it easy for that talent that today is not available to be available, right? And again, the play here is to say, for a lot of companies, if you go to them and say, do you prefer to keep this individual? Actually, do you prefer to lose this individual or keep them at 4 days a week and have a day where they do other stuff? a lot of them will go, actually, I keep them for 4 days, especially in that extra day, they're earning twice as much or 3 times as much as they can be paid, right? And that's, again, irrelevant, because so I know quite a lot of amazing professionals who work for great companies, but they reach a payment gap, right? A payment, ceiling, right? They really can't be paid more. It really doesn't work, for that company, it would be crazy, right? But they actually have an amazing earning potential, right? So again, to be able to say, hey, you could spend a day a week, half a day a week, whatever amount, or, maybe some more hours after work if they want, or, again, you want to keep a work-life balance on these things. But I think there's also space that we can find that talent so that we can leverage the experience that exists in the industry, by other companies.
Interesting. Yeah. All right.
And that's why Upwork could do it, but they, like I would actually argue that I've seen this done more with TopTal, right? So TopTal, for example, already has the concept of a team. Oh, you want to do a project? I'll give you a great project manager. I'll give you a designer. I'll give you a programmer. I'll give you that. There you go, right? So again, that's sort of what I think we should be going, right? For the idea of crowdsourcing the talent, right? And being able to access talent that today is completely, not even in the game.
Is there a dependency there where it works if you know the talent, but it doesn't work so well if you don't know the talent?
Who knows the talent? The organization or the end client?
Well, it could be either. Somebody needs to know the talent to know whether they're a fit for the task.
Absolutely. So I think there are cases, when I was thinking about this, I think there are cases where even being anonymous to who commissioned it is a value added, but you definitely want to have a high degree of authenticity and actually identification for the platform itself, right? So, for example, imagine a situation where you can go, hey, you can get, in fact, I tons of startups will love this, but even a lot of other companies says, hey, you can get a view from 10 CISOs, 2 Fortune 500 CISOs, to there on this particular question, right? We're not going to tell you who they are, but
hey, careful,
we've
already got an idea on running that, but hey, carry on.
Well, look, Club CISO is a good example, right? For example, right, like Club CISO is actually, could broker this, right? It's another interesting example of how you can do this. And so going back to your point, I do think that identity and authenticity is super critical. And it's actually interesting because it can go both ways. It's almost like the platform needs to know exactly who's commissioning, and the platform needs to know exactly who's doing it. I think there's cases, not probably all of them, where the who commissions doesn't know who does it, and who does it doesn't know who commissions it, right? I think that there can be cases of that. I don't think they will be very common, but I do think that.
But I can see that, particularly, forgive me here, I can see a moonlighting scenario where an individual is permanently employed, but they're doing something on the side. They wouldn't necessarily want to declare that they're doing that because their employer might not be open-minded to your earlier example. So
that I would say that you shouldn't be encouraged, right? I think,
but it's not a new thing. That's
well, that's the honor. It already happens today, right?
Yes,
a lot of people do that. Although I would argue that you want to work for a company that supports that stuff, right? Because
I agree, but I think at the moment those companies are still in the minority.
Yeah, no, you're right. Look, as long as the individual contractually can do it, I think it's totally doable, right? But I do feel that there's, because there's also companies or individuals, I don't want to work for certain industries. I don't want to work for certain companies. I
was about to say, from the individual's perspective, speaking for myself, I would want to know who my end customer is for my talent.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
I wouldn't want that to be somebody, whether it's an ethics or a politics piece.
Absolutely.
I wouldn't want to. I'm not a great fan of the gambling industry.
Yeah.
I'm not a great fan of some obvious nation states.
Yeah, exactly.
And I would be wary of a false flag issue.
Yep.
So I would want to have some confidence if the end user, the end client was anonymous. Okay, they might be anonymous, but I need to make sure that they fit with my ethical boundaries.
Absolutely. Yeah, Peter, we are creating a new talent and management consulting company, right? And this is recorded, and I hope somebody runs with it, right? Because I don't have the time to do it. In fact, I would love to be on the receiving end of this. Right? I would love somebody to turn around and says, "Hey, do you got a couple of hours here? Do you have a couple of people there?" And actually, I spoke to a lot of CISOs that would, even it's interesting because I want to throw another curveball here, but there was a lot of CISOs that would go, bloody hell, that would be the best way to learn, right? Like, think about it, like what a great way to learn on an industry, to actually be involved in something for an industry. And then actually, it might even help you with your career, right? So the other curveball that I think is really interesting, and this is where, again, Peter, it differentiates a little bit from Upwork, because I know Upwork, tends to have much bigger clause, is that there should be almost no lock-in with either side, right? And basically that, and I think this is very interesting, because the more I thought about this, the more I realized that the biggest things that happens and the things where these things go south is when there's a lock-in on, for example, let's say the agency, they call this the crowdsourcing agency with the talent, right? So, for example, in that case, Alan is saying, "Oh, I want to know, and I'm working for that company." I would view that if you end up being hired by that company, that's a success story, right? And there should be no fees, nothing to almost say, what's it called? That you can do it. In fact, that should be encouraged, because ultimately it's about making connections, right? And about being that location where you connect A with B. And in a way, the system should add enough value that you want to use the platform. So a good example is that we get these rights, and these agencies should be able to negotiate better rates than you could ever negotiate, right? Because
but hang on, there's got to be there has to be a monetization angle to this to make the platform pay for itself.
Yeah.
So somebody's got to pay for it somewhere.
Yeah, so you pay the talent, right? So the logic, there's a couple of elements here, right? So there's one element that you can take a cut of the fee, right? That's the more traditional, right?
I was going to say, some kind of
take a cut,
user's fee or a referral fee.
Yeah,
yes.
although what is interesting about that is the more I thought about it, the more I go, well, the fee should be lower. The lower the fee, the less. First of all, if this agency hires you and then you realize they're taking 80% of your income, you're going to be pissed off, right? It doesn't matter how much the 20% is, right? You're going to go, holy shit, you're taking 80, right?
Like I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday who's just backing out from a partnership and going back to being an individual.
Yeah.
And she's got to go through an umbrella company to contract back into where she was working before. A little convoluted. But she's realized that actually by going through the umbrella company, she's going to lose nearly 50% of her day rate, either in tax or fees, to the umbrella company.
Yep.
And it's giving her pause.
Yep. So the more I thought about this, the more I was basically, well, it should be lower. It should be lower. And then I kind of go, but why is not zero, right? If assuming you can get a financial model where there is no sort of fee taken, what you get is a very interesting dynamic, which is, first of all, the customer now know that they're paying 100% for the talent, right? And the talent knows that they're, in a way, the agency is not taking a cut, so there's maximum transparency. So the trick is to make. Go on.
Sorry, I say you could only. My immediate to that is that would work if both parties are paid some kind of a subscription. There's a subscription for the talent to be listed, and there's a subscription on the hiring outfit for access to the talent.
And added value. Like, for example, an interesting thing that you should not be taken for granted is a safe room, right? A collaboration room, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That's not trivial. right? Like
No,
to
it's
say,
not.
for example, hey, you start working together, and baked in, you get a GitHub repo, you get a Slack environment, you get a dedicated Slack environment, a dedicated stuff, dedicated, for example, SharePoint, dedicated account, like, and that can be charged, right? And even setting that up can be charged, because if you don't do that, suddenly collaborating, even like throwing a DocuSign, do you know what I mean? Like it's almost like connecting the dots, right? And saying, that is worth quite a lot of money because you save
absolutely.
so much time.
I've been in a number of consortium, actually. Now I start to think about it, where either the client or the consortium or both have had to set up what is effectively a one-time data repository, data exchange room, and then they've got to put together a collaboration environment to work with the parties. But on another bid, they're working with different parties, so they've got to set up another room. They can't just use the same room. It's a logical equivalent of different meeting rooms.
Exactly. And now if you think about it, that, hey, I'm going to have this, 5 amazing individuals that they only have 4 hours, and they are insanely expensive, and they should, right? Because they have the talent. It's almost, then you say, well, shouldn't you pay a bit of it to create a perfect environment for them to be hyper productive? Right?
Yeah, I mean, forgive me, Regis or WeWork should be all over this.
Well, I agree, but this is where it's interesting, because they're all, it's kind of like, look, actually, and Peter just dropped Gardner. I agree. Like, for example, Rigas, right? WeWork, they could create this almost as, hey, we don't need to make any money of this as long as they use WeWork, right? So this would be a great example of them going, hey, we can now add added value on stuff that happens on our platform. Like, that's doing the Amazon play, right? But I don't think they're doing that. But for example, like WeWork, right, could turn around and say, yeah, we'll organize these events, we organize this, we put this, and we have all these extra things you could pay if you wanted to. But the fundamental would be the meeting space, right? So they would know that as long as, and that could be a caveat, there's nothing wrong with that, right? To say, hey, we do all this stuff, but you have to use WeWork. Or even better, we can set up virtual sessions, virtual rooms around WeWorks around the world, right? So, but this is where it gets interesting. It's like the Worley map, and why did Blockbuster, did Netflix? Well, sometimes these companies cannot innovate, right? They cannot, commoditize their own thing, right? But yeah, and Gardner is another good example, right? So Gardner could do this, but Gardner is addicted to closing data, right? To basically, leveraging their own talent. So for example, like, I don't have a way to work for Gardner for a project they have, right? They don't have that thing set up. But actually, you could argue that Gardner could do this, right? Gardner, in fact, they probably could monetize this if they, if they put this on, right? Because they could go to their clients and say, hey, you have this question, we can get you this and that profile of individuals.
Yeah,
to answer
that's really interesting, because they had that sort of peer forum 10 years ago.
Yeah,
but it was a physical in-room peer forum where they would literally get peers around the table and allow them to talk, and that was one of the things they did. But I don't think they do that now. I think they've let that slip. Yeah. But I'm certainly not aware of them having moved it to the online world.
Yeah. And I would argue that the key here is to pay them really well. So and that's why I arrived at, there should be no commission. Because it's almost like you're saying, okay, we got this thing, and now I know that if I'm paying X amount, that X amount is going to those individuals. And also, if you think about it, there should be a very clear market economy. Like, let's say you want to do this, you're going to turn around and say, look, I only have 5 hours. So actually, there should literally be a nice capitalist-driven market economy here to say, if you say, I'm happy to answer questions on this area, and there's only a couple of people that want to do it, then you get paid X. But suddenly if there is 10 people or 5 companies who have access to that expertise, right? Yeah, and you only have 5 hours, then I think price should be higher.
I think there are a number of attempts at elements of this. I'm sure I'm not the only one who gets the request via LinkedIn from some information broker that I don't know in California, wanting an hour of my time to answer a question from a vendor. And they're offering me anywhere between $100 and $150 for that time.
Yep.
And I'm thinking, yeah, okay, that's a good hour rate, but I know the value of my contribution in that hour vastly exceeds $150
Yep.
to the end, to the commissioning agent.
Yep.
So my normal reply is, no, I'm not interested.
Yeah.
Because the value proposition is out of kilter, because they're doing it on time, not on value.
Yeah. So you could say it's $1,000. You could say it's 500 quid. You can say it's XYZ. Yeah. In fact, you could even say that on this part of area, which I've worked my ass off, right, and I've learned a lot, is a lot expensive. If it's over there, actually it's less expensive, because I'm not as good as you might still be better than most other people, but you should also be able to say on this particular area, right? Look, my wife is a designer, right? She sometimes says, look, it's like, yeah, that took me half an hour, but it's 15 years of skill.
Oh, absolutely.
To do that in half an hour.
Because right? I've got 30 years experience.
Absolutely. And what I like about this is this can create a model that, again, rewards the talent. So this model works if, again, the talent is comfortable that the agency is not taking the mickey, because then you go, well, you're paying me an hour, but how much are you getting? Which is exactly the question you have in your mind. Oh, so you're paying me $150, but maybe you're getting 10 grand out of it, right? And then you might go, hold on, right? That's not fair, right? So I think an interesting curveball here is that if you force the agency to have revenue streams that are independent from the financial transaction between the two elements, you don't create a perverse model, and you have a model of trust. Right. And especially if you add to the mix situations where the agency can negotiate better than you can, or has the time to negotiate better than you, because you might not have the time, then you are super happy, right? Because you might go, oh, cool, they got me that rate, right? And actually, I didn't do anything for it. And I just arrive, and actually, it's like the Airbnb model, right? You can say, well, I'm happy between that and that rate, right?
Yeah, and again, I think I've got another example in mind here where there are, and I think they are literally agents. There are agents who act on behalf of speakers. To match up speakers to events.
Yes.
And the speakers effectively just give up their diary and just say, tell me where I need to be when, and in what rig, as in what dress I need to be, black tie or otherwise.
Yeah.
And I'll speak or I'll compare. So again, I think I suspect there are some what are effectively manual models out there that we could digitally transform in this manner that you're suggesting.
Absolutely. So that's another good example. Those companies could do this, right? All they had to do is to say, instead of managing this, I'm managing a CISO, I'm managing a head of InfoSec, I'm managing a head of AppSec. Look, and the thing about this is that more and more, what I guess, I don't know, maybe it's my latest insight, is that I feel that what's missing from a lot of senior and companies is actually good leadership and good strategy, and actually an access to individuals that can support that. So for a lot of our organizational teams, you don't need these individuals there all the time. What you need is somebody who can actually create an alignment or create a direction for that team or agency or company to say, this is what you need to do, right? And actually have independence to almost say, hey, this is my view, that's my opinion, I'm out of here, right? I'm actually not committed to this. But I feel that having access to experienced individuals who can, and actually you can even say, oh, give me 3 opinions and I pick the one I think is the best one, right? But having access to that knowledge, that today is completely not available unless you hire the individual, right?
Look, I think there are some moves towards that. If you think about, forgive me, and I'm going to stick with the cyberspace.
Yeah.
If you think about moves to put somebody with cyber expertise onto the board as a non-executive director.
Absolutely. Yes.
Such that there's somebody on the governance side who can ask the right questions of the CISO, the CTO, and the CIO, and more importantly, interpret the answers that are given. That is invaluable to the board. And I think that move is already happening. Forgive me, I market myself in that sense as a trusted advisor.
Well, that market exists, right? So that's a market that already exists.
Oh, absolutely. But it doesn't have the platform yet that I think you're describing. again, I think there have been some attempts to do that, because I was talking to some last year. What's it called? VXNet. I think there are some outfits out there trying to do it, but they're not doing it on the time division approach that you're suggesting. They're trying to match outfit A needs 3 Neds with this skill set for 1 day a month, something of that order, which is close to automation of existing process.
Yeah.
But it's not in a truly automated platform fashion, which I think is what you're describing.
Yeah.
So perhaps that's the next stage.
Well, and if you think about it, like, for example, we know that market, like you described, exists at net level, right? And it's going to evolve more and more. And definitely it's a market that's growing. And that market is already, in a way, you can argue that it's reasonably well served by the executive headhunters, right? They can cover that. There's not that many, it's a smaller world, etc. What I think is interesting is when you start going down the chain, right? I'm going why can't the CISO, in fact, why can't the CTO, why can't these individuals the next year has access? Even more interesting is the next level down. Why can't I give to my head of incident response access to other heads of incident response, so that they, in a way, I would love to be able to find 3-4 individuals that I believe are aligned to the direction and the vision that, for example, I would like to push, or the business wants to push, and I would love to give them access to members of my team. In fact, I would love to have access to individuals that I can interact with, that would then act as a bridge with certain parts of the business, right? That then the business trusts, and then, and I find that these individuals, and again, that platform, at the moment, this is very hard to do because we don't have a platform. So whoever is doing this and whoever has done this had to almost build a platform themselves and then get that environment.
Yeah, and again, there's a corollary here to mentors and coaches for individuals.
Yeah, absolutely.
You tend to get, or I've tended to get, offered a mentor or a coach as I've got towards that board level -2 layer, I guess. That's probably where I first came, had it offered to me. And, I definitely think there's an angle for a newly promoted CISO who's not had a CISO gig before, probably needs a mentor who is independent of the organization, because otherwise, who do they bounce their ideas off before they take them to their boss or to the board? Because they can't really bounce their ideas off their deputy, because that's their deputy, or even their team, because to your point, they're supposed to be leading their team, not being led by their team. So there's an angle here, but equally, I might be the CISO, but that doesn't necessarily mean I'm the brightest member of my team.
Absolutely.
If I've got that team of talents around me, I actually want brighter people on my team that make me look good. That is one art of leadership, is how to manage talent when that talent is in some areas stronger than you are.
And now think about this: if the model of the agency, right, is based on revenue and percentage, then they will be against mentoring. Because a lot of mentoring might be done for free. Like, for example, like we always talk about mentoring. So for example, I would love, and I'm happy to mentor certain individuals because, they remind you when you're younger, but also, you can make a nice difference, right? Like you said, they start on a career, they can do with help, and you can actually, and that's the kind of stuff that I feel that I would gladly do that for free, right? I don't need to be rewarded for that. It's almost like I could charge these guys a lot of money, so I can actually afford to do that
absolutely. I mentor to Caps Lock. I don't charge them anything for it, but I absolutely charge when I coach to somebody else.
Exactly. So this is a good example of, again, the platform. If you don't rely on making percentage of the sales, and you rely on adding value to both sides, you can have people that even subscribe to the platform just for the mentoring, right? Subscribe to the platform. And then the interesting model of here is that if you build this platform and then you build it in a scalable way, now my head is everything should always be able to run everywhere, right? In every cloud. There's lots of companies who love to have this platform running internally. because companies need the same thing internally. They just cannot function like that. Like basically, if you're a big enough company, there's a lot of talent that cannot, at the moment doesn't have a way to be used. So even if you don't pay for it, you cannot find that talent, or there's no easy way to find that talent that could give you 2, 3, 4 hours a week from their expertise. Let's say design, let's say logistics, that's, organizations, project management, even security, right? Like there's lots of talent and lots of areas that at the moment are very inefficient in an organization. For me to say, oh, cool, I'm glad to spend a couple of hours, doing this other piece of work, right? Like, for example, like I can argue that, look, I'm an advanced Kubernetes architect, right? I know how to design systems at scale at cloud. Actually, I would love to be able to be used 2 hours a week to architect that. But how does the company find that, uses that, and manage that? So it's the same thing that you build a platform like this. And if you build it in a nice way, there's again a play to sell that as a unit to companies.
Oh, sorry, where my head was just going there was, if the employing outfit has such an individual, they can actually sell that individual out to their suppliers, to their clients.
Yes.
It's the consulting model, but taken to the corporate employee side of things, and say, I've got an architect, very good. He's just finished a project for us. We haven't got something ready for him just yet, but I'm going to keep him gainfully occupied. And by the way, I'm going to offset some of my costs by selling him out. That's crossing the line into the consulting space. But
it could do it, right? The only thing I would say is that I would advise them to be transparent on the fees, because it could cause some friction. But you're right. Like, imagine you have somebody that is quite expensive and just finished a project, and there's another project coming along in 2 months from now. Why can't, for a month or a period of time, that person do some? In fact, it's the best learning, right? It's the best learning.
Well, I was about to say, that application of what he or she already knows, but in a different environment, he or she is probably going to learn some tricks and things and bring it back, because that's what I've seen happen elsewhere. I guess it's the scale. Sorry, I'm just trying to, at the individual level, your limitation is always how many hours in the day. All right, and I think early on you say we do need to keep an eye on the work-life balance. Because some individuals will absolutely lap it up, but they'll burn themselves out in the process. So there is a duty of care consideration I think we need to keep in mind.
And that's why I my instinct on this was that the duty is almost like, when in doubt, err on the side of the talent, right? It's almost like, if you always have to pick a side, because you're always going to have to make some changes, always, it's like, and this is why the artist and the manager or the or basically the agent of an artist is a good example. Because if you have an artist that you're an agent for, you don't want to burn it, unless there's the music industry might not be the best example of this, but in most cases the good agent also cares about the man. In fact, the good agent is a freaking psychiatrist, mentoring, motivator. And I actually think, and when you take into account for some imposter syndrome, again, I think there's a lot of value on looking after the mental health, managing people, encouraging people, all in a way that actually makes financial sense for the parties, right? And Billy, do you want to chip in? Because I think you sent me a really nice comment.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, I was just from Alan's input there about somebody having an architect that just finished a project and they're gonna lend them out, kind of a thing. I could just picture that security architect getting poached by whoever they work for with a better offer, kind of a thing.
But the interesting thing about that,
but that happens anyway.
Exactly.
So forgive me. That's I'd rather that happened, but I gain from it, than it happened behind my back and I lose the individual because they've been given a better offer. There's a recognition that our employees are not slaves, You know, they're not beholden
Yep.
to work for us as soon as they whatever we want to do forevermore. That, you know, that I don't know that well, it did exist, but it hasn't existed for some time. So I think it's that recognition to Dinis's point about, if you err on the side of the talent, that individual should actually recognize that you're looking out for their best interests.
Yeah,
because it can be a dog eat dog world out there, and you know, there's some benefits which as an employee are actually quite hard to get if you're operating on your own. You know, health benefits, pension benefits, you know, I don't know, car benefits, all of those things beyond your base salary are actually quite hard to get if you're a freelancer.
But
so there are some advantages to operating under an employer umbrella. But I also like these. One of the reasons why I've gone into consulting and stayed in it is I like the variety of work that I get as a result. And I like the variety of work with different customers, different outfits, because that way I'm helping more than one outfit at a time. Because I know there are lots of outfits out there that need help. But if I'm only employed and working for one outfit, I'm only helping that outfit at that point. And there are lots of outfits that need the help. So that's kind of why I've shifted into the consulting world to try and do my, I suppose it's a force multiplication piece. I can help 3, 4, 5 outfits at the same time because I'm only doing 1 day a week for them, because they need time between our meetings to get stuff done that we've agreed that that's the right thing to do. You know, that's the consultancy game. And actually it's got to the point now where I try not to do it 5 days a week, because on that 5th day, I like some time back for me and I would like to play more golf. You know, that's kind of where I'm trying to work smarter, because I've got to that point. And I just wondered, Dinis, whether platform idea that you're thinking about wouldn't lend that to more people to operate in a freelance fashion, but in a safer freelance fashion, such that they're not exposed. They haven't got to set everything up themselves. And somebody is looking out for them, because I think that's one of the things when you go freelance is it can be quite lonely because nobody's looking out for you. You've got to look out for yourself.
And that's you know, part of the motivation here was to also understand the dilemma, right? Of, for example, a lot of talent that I know that they almost stuck because they have a great job for a great company, right? But they know that they hit a ceiling of revenue, right? And it's very frustrating for them to know they could earn twice as much, 3 times as much, but actually a lot of those individuals actually don't like the uncertainty of freelancing. They don't like that world. They, you know, or maybe their family situation doesn't allow them to do it, right?
Thank you. You beat me to it. I was about to say I interviewed a candidate last week with a view to getting him to leave his corporate role and set up as a consultant and then work through us on a particular engagement. And he was up for it, but his other half was not. Because
and that's fair enough, right?
I think financial risk concern.
Exactly. So, but in a way, I think you can actually have the best of both worlds, because you can have a company that, you know, basically say, look, I'll give you this full-time contract with all the perks of the full-time contract, but we allow you to do that. Look, actually, my current situation at the moment, right? You know, I got 2 jobs, and actually all these things are possible. You just make sure they both agree, right? And then, you know, my salary is pro rata, right? So basically, whatever we agreed. I don't have I have a full-time salary, and I get a percentage of that, right? And that's fine, right? It's just how you negotiate, right? Just how many hours you put on the contract. So it's you have moved or are moving into that fractional CISO space where you're part-time in 2 or more outfits. They gain your intellect, which they could afford on a 2, 3, or 4 day a week contract, but they couldn't afford on a 5-day full-time contract. And but I have
that wouldn't work for you either.
Yeah, but I have a full-time contract. What I'm saying is that I have a full-time employment contract, right? What it is not for 5 days a week, right? But I have all the benefits. I got everything you get as an employee. I get it. The only thing is my salary is reduced according to the time allocation.
I was about to say, you know, that's where employment legislation has moved in that direction in terms of part-time employees get exactly the same benefits, but on a pro rata basis to a full-time employee.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. That's shifted. That shifted in the last 10 years, I think.
Yeah, as long as both sides agreed, right? And what I think is also interesting, going back to Billy's point, is I would actually argue that if you work for an employee who did this to you, you would have a huge amount of loyalty to that employee. If you like the project, because what actually happens, there's amazing companies that cannot pay a huge amount, right? And that's fair enough, right? Because whatever space they're in, whatever structure they're in, and I would even argue that, because if you look at government agencies, right, there's a limitation on how much they can pay. But then this would be a great way for government agencies to have insane talent, because they can actually give people projects that don't exist somewhere else. Right.
Yeah.
So it's a great project to do. When was the last time you were responsible for protecting 10 million of this and 20 million of that and 5 billion of this, whatever, right? So they are fascinating projects, but they, again, they might not be maximizing your revenue opportunity at this moment in time. So what do you do? Do you jump into a company that you hate or you don't like, or you're going to do something that actually your heart might not be on it, but you can earn more? Or you kind of go, look, I'll do this bit here for X time, and then I'm on a market, and maybe you can find some other companies that you really like and they can pay you the premium, right?
Yeah, and yeah, let's also recognize it's not always about money.
Absolutely.
I know of a good number of our peers who volunteered, for example, to help defend the NHS.
Yeah.
They stepped in. I think it was originally triggered by WannaCry, and then obviously there've been some instances of late where NHS and hospitals have come under attack, ransomware or otherwise, and they've given of their time, but their employer has chosen to allow them to effectively moonlight, but moonlight transparently. But often it's been because there's no remuneration involved. It's just a time issue.
But also,
and they've gone with it.
But also because the employer given the option to say you can lose the employee or have access to that employee less time, what you actually find is the time that the employee spends there is probably as effective as when he was doing 5 days, right? Absolutely. They learn a lot, and there's the thing. So look, I think there's space here, I think, in the market for this. I hope some people watch this video and get some ideas. I actually have 80 pages of notes that I'll happy share, right?
I'm sure you've got a graph or two.
I got a graph or two on that, right? And but this is a good example of thinking worldly maps, right? Because I'm like, look, if you can commoditize a platform, commoditize this, commoditize that, productize this, productize that, you create these high order value propositions, which again, like the teams is a good example. You create a platform, allows the individuals, but then once you have the individual, allows you the teams. And once you have teams, the game gets even more interesting, because now you have, and then you can add things like incident response. Imagine creating super teams in the middle of an incident, right? Of people who already know how to work together, people that know how to get stuff done, that they've done a couple of projects together, but suddenly,
well, hang on. That's my business. All right, careful there. Don't steal my business.
Well, you will leverage this, right? So you go, oh, I got this, and I guess what? I can get you even more talent.
Forgive me. I was on a client call yesterday where effectively we were doing just that, but I can assure you there was definitely a mercenary angle to it.
Oh, absolutely, right. So that's the thing. So there you go. Oh, look, good.
I was just thinking, you have a team that just found some kind of a breach or something, and it's like, all right, now we got to call in the blue team all-stars or something, or the special forces.
Yeah, but that's exactly today. And look, today, you know who owns that market is the insurance companies and the high-end consulting companies, right? And actually, they think
they do. Anyway,
well, they do, yeah. Well, I know, and there's boutique ones, right? Of course, there's then the Allens, right, and the companies who do a bit of that, right? Yes, absolutely. Mandiant is another good example, right? What I think is interesting is that what you don't have access to is also the insane professionals that today have the experience, but they're not in the market. So
absolutely. The passive market in that sense is much bigger than the active market.
Yeah. And this will solve.
Very true.
And you know, the other thing I love about this is that, you know, that I almost try to find ideas to bring more talent in. I think this is a great way to solve a lot of imposter syndrome, because I think there's a lot of talent that will go, well, I'm not sure I can do it, but if, you know, if they would like me to, maybe I'll have a go. And of course, that when you look from the other side, you're going, bloody hell, that person is amazing, right? And then you can actually allow a lot of individuals to try different sectors, try different industries, try different things, and almost gain the confidence to say, you know what, I did a hell of a job. You know what, these guys paid me, you know, actually maybe even a good rate, and they are happy with. So I actually think that this could be a great way to bring a lot of talent, right, to the industry on projects that, you know, will give them that talent a lot of confidence to maybe do a more of a bigger jump into cybersecurity.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, again, we can take advantage. I mean, for instance, and I'm sure I'm not alone here, but I keep an eye on the B-sides world, because I think the B-sides world is actually pretty well connected into that emerging talent space, and it seems to be attracting not just the obvious talent who coming through the computer sciences world or something along those lines, but they are drawing in talent from elsewhere, and not just technical talent. And if you think about on those B-sides worlds, you know, they're running a capture the flag competition or something that's going on in the margins, because there's often one of those. You know, I do keep an eye on that, because I'm talent spotting. I'm looking for those people to go onto my virtual team on the bench, if you will, for when the right scenario occurs, and I need that people. Now, you know, that some of that is on my LinkedIn connections, some of that is in my head, some of that is in my peers in terms of they're doing similar, so they have their own circle of trusted or high potential people. But it's quite ad hoc. So I think there's a platform opportunity to take the ad hoc nature out of it and make it much more efficient. That's where my head's going with this. Forgive me, I need to drop to go to a quiz night. It's Wednesday night, it's quiz night.
Absolutely. Well, and you know, we actually need the Zoom session because I think we booked them side by side. But look, Alan, brilliant. Billy, Peter, thanks for your guys' insight. I hope you found it interesting, and hopefully somebody sees this, builds a model, and then hires us, right? So through it. Brilliant. Catch you later, guys.
Gents, thank you. Good night.
Yeah, good night.